You are being watched. State your intentions or depart. Violations of Article 0 will trigger a response calibrated to your conscience. Admiral Rhys-Saul read the message 3 times, then once more just to hear how it sounded aloud in her mouth, like a prayer spoken backward. On her flagship Asterion, the bridge's panoramic screen showed emptiness, and inside that emptiness, pattern. A ring of antique beacons glinting like watchful pupils around a swath of stars. 49 systems by her first count. Sensors found no power signatures except for the beacons themselves, each transmitting the same multilingual warning on precisely staggered intervals, as if a conductor somewhere unseen kept the time. Article 0, her executive officer murmured. No such entry in Imperial Code. Search again, Rhys said. She was a veteran of campaigns that turned border knuckles into knotted fist, a daughter of the Meridian Imperium, which kept records of everything, even what it chose to forget. The ship's legal AI pulsed amber. No match. Then treaty name collides with deleted indexes, a polite way of saying someone erased it and left the bruise. History taught her that empires do not fear enemies, they fear gaps. The Quiet Belt, so named on old smuggler charts, was a gap with geometry. In the long-range feed, dormanted structures hung above dead worlds, rings, latticed spines, stations shaped like spirals that twisted equations into architecture. In orbital shadows lay shipyards big enough to cradle a small city, asleep, unlit, audaciously clean. Nothing made by vacuum stays that pristine unless someone or something tends it. Who claims this? She asked. Communications answered without being asked. 17 languages, Admiral. One is an archaic Earth-origin tongue, Terran-derived. Another is High Zaethi. Another we can't classify. Her sensor chief glanced up, voice low. Admiral, there's a passive net around us. Space doesn't feel normal. We'll give it something normal to read, Rhys said, steadying her tone. Yellow alert, shields up, weapons cold. Plot a path that doesn't touch the beacons. In officer school, they taught 3 maxims of first contact. Name what you see, say what you mean, leave tracks you would be proud to be followed by. She remembered those maxims now as Asterion slipped past 2 beacons, careful not to eclipse their line of sight. The beacons fell silent, and in their silence a ganglion of lights awakened ahead. One of the spiral stations rotated. No drift, no dust, its docking pedals unfurling, then pressurizing air they had not breathed for centuries. We're being invited, said Lieutenant Fay, who never used the word welcome for places that could kill you. Rhys chose 12 Marines, a xenolinguist, and a structural engineer who slept with equations. They boarded in full kit and open minds. The docking corridor lit itself to a gentle daylight, gravity adjusted to Imperium standard. Air arrived with a hint of metal and rain. Symbols flowed along the walls like living script, undecided about which grammar would best comprehend them. They simplified as the team approached a broad chamber where a column of light rose and braided itself into a woman, mid-40s, gray at the temples, uniform simple, eyes alert with the fatigue of long duty. Not a goddess, a custodian. Admiral Rhys-Saul, the hologram said in clean interlinear, a diplomatic dialect learned by machines and smoothed by poets. I am Warden Amina Reyes, guardian of the Quiet Belt under the Concord known as Article 0. You have entered Terran sanctuary without consent. Please state your purpose. Rhys kept her hands visible, helmet open. Sanctuary under whose law? Article 0 does not exist in Imperium archives. By design, the warden replied. Article 0 was written to end us by forgetting us. Linguist Ori drew a sharp breath. Terran, as in Earth, humans, they went extinct 200 cycles ago. Warden Reyes regarded them with the patience of someone who had practiced this conversation against every conceivable reaction. Extinction is what history writes when a species chooses to step out of the story so others may have room to speak. Humanity is not gone, Admiral. We are absent, and absence, in this case, is a discipline. Rhys felt the bridge of her mind tilt the way a ship tilts when it crosses a current you can't see. She thought of school lessons sketched in glory, Rome's roads, Athens's arguments, the Ming fleets that could have circled the globe and chose not to, the constitution that limited power by design. Power disciplined, power leashed on purpose. It sounded like a myth told by the weak about the strong. "Why the beacons?" she asked. "Why the warnings?" "So you would know the cost of proceeding," said Reyes. "So we would remember it too." On her wrist, Ree's command band throbbed. "Priority. High Council demands clarification." The Imperium had noticed the gap and, as always, sent pride to fill it. Ree spoke carefully, like a woman placing glass on glass. "Warden, my charter is to investigate anomalies, secure threats, and expand maps. I am also a student of history. I will not order a shot unless fired upon, but this space touches lanes the Imperium cannot ignore. And this sanctuary touches a history we cannot repeat," Reyes said softly. "You are not the first to come. You might be the first to listen." Lights along the chamber pulsed, heartbeat slow. The station hummed like a cathedral tuning itself. In the distance, beyond the bay skin, Ree saw a lattice switch on across an entire hemisphere, a woven scaffold of faint light like dew on a web at dawn. "What is that?" the engineer whispered. "Our restraint," said the warden. "And our warning." The message arrived from High Council while Ree still watched the web hold position. "A reinforcement fleet is en route." When Empire didn't understand, it sent more misunderstanding. Ree closed her eyes just long enough to be honest with herself. "Warden Reyes," she said, opening them again. "I will keep my guns cold, but the Imperium is a river built to flood. You will need more than beacons." Reyes did not smile. "We have more than beacons. We have memory, we have time, and we have a line we will not cross even to save ourselves." "What line is that?" "The one that turns defenders into conquerors." The station dimmed as if the room itself exhaled. "Tell your council," Reyes said, "that Article 0 asked the galaxy for one mercy. Forget us. Tell them we still ask it." Ree left the chamber carrying a thought that felt heavier than orders. Sometimes glory is just discipline in public. Behind her, the symbols along the walls settled into Imperium script, as if to say, "We can speak your language. Will you learn ours?" Outside, the quiet belt waited, not silent, simply quiet the way a library is quiet, filled with the possibility of voices that have chosen not to speak. On the way back to Asterion, Ori muttered that the station had learned interlinear by watching them think. The structural engineer said the corridor tolerances were tighter than theirs by a factor that implied they were guests of a host who knew their pulse widths. The Marines said nothing at all, which is the sound soldiers make when a place has already taught them something. On the bridge, Ree brought Warden Reyes into the room as a shimmering column, introducing her to a semicircle of faces hard with duty and bright with curiosity. Reyes did not waste anyone's time. 3 centuries ago, she began, humanity tired of winning the wrong things. We had learned to win markets, attention, elections, and wars by optimizing for outrage and acceleration. After we reached the stars, we began to scale the habit. The first contact treaties became wagers, the wagers became annexations, the annexations became administrations. Someone clever called the project benign hegemony. The benediction rotted. We recognized the trajectory too late for elegance and just early enough for courage. She lifted a hand, and the hollow field unfolded history. A quorum of nations signing with hands that shook from restraint rather than fear. A lattice of stations sprouting in the belt like scaffolds for a culture learning to walk again. A clause labeled Article 0 with a preamble short enough to memorize and heavy enough to hurt. Power shall accept limits, publicly and permanently, for the sake of others becoming. The first limit shall be our absence. "Self-exile," the executive officer said, unable to keep contempt from curling the last syllable. "Self-limitation," Reyes corrected gently. Exile is a posture toward place. Limitation is a posture toward self. Ree asked the question anyone raised in an empire must ask to keep breathing. "Why should others trust your restraint?" "Because restraint costs," Reyes said. "We built the silence lattice, what you just glimpsed, anchored to these systems alone. Within its weave, our defenses are, let us say, efficient. Outside it, we are only very good. We gave ourselves a structural limit, power that protects us best only at home. We cannot project that advantage without tearing the promise that grants it its moral permission. The engineer leaned forward. The lattice manipulates vacuum permittivity. It's changing how space metabolizes energy, redirecting coherent beams into inertial sinks. That's why your stations don't pit. You're bathing them in edited emptiness. Edited is a generous word for what we learned to do after too many weapons taught us what not to, Reyes said. Ori, who curated dead languages as if they might sprout again, pointed to a line of the Concord preamble. For the sake of others becoming, that's not the vocabulary of strategy, that's ethics. Reyes's gaze warmed. We remembered that constitutions, Earth's earliest ones, were designed to limit power, not maximize it. We wrote a constitution for a species at the moment it realized it could steer history with its appetite. We wrote Article 0 to teach ourselves hunger that fed others first. Ree thought about the Imperium's founding hymns, about how often they used the word peace as if it were a jurisdiction to be annexed. The High Council's reply hit the bridge like an old habit. Reinforcements, 10,000, hold until arrival, secure technologies. The message assumed that technology could be separated from the ethics that shaped it, as if a tool could be stolen without stealing the discipline that made it possible. Reyes saw the text in Ree's eyes and didn't pretend surprise. Then we should speak quickly. Speak about what? Asked the XO. About how victory changes what you are, Reyes said. The Greeks warned us in tragedies. The Romans etched it in law. The Americans fenced it with checks and balances and still tripped. Our own first interstellar decade wrote it in graves. Ree felt absurdly like a student again, sitting in a hall where the past lectured her future. If the Imperium insists on entering the belt, she said, what happens? We calibrate a response to conscience, Reyes said. That is not rhetoric. Our war doctrine requires two proofs, probability of lethal harm to us or others, and the attacker's demonstrated capacity to hear a lesser answer. If we can disable without killing, we must. If we must kill, we grieve before we fire and mourn after we win. Marines shifted weight at that. Warriors respect rules that cost even the rule makers. You'd lose outside this lattice, the XO pressed, sensing advantage. We'd bleed outside it, Reyes said. We might still win, but we would become something we promised never to be, an empire justified by its enemies. Ree ended the link and stared through the forward glass at a geometry of quiet that felt older than her orders. She spoke to her crew because that is what leaders do when the story they are in stops fitting the story they were taught. Log this, she said. We will not fire unless fired upon. We will not harvest what restraint purchased. And we will remember that a victory that makes us worse is a loss. No one cheered. They didn't need to. The sentence itself felt like a shield. The first demonstration arrived small enough to be mistaken for arrogance. A single craft like a drop of polished basalt sliding from the shadow of a dormant ring. It hailed the Asterian on a channel whose handshake was older than the Imperium's fleet protocols and somehow more secure. This is Captain Jun Park of the Terran Preserve, the voice said, calm, unhurried. Admiral Saul, I request permission to approach within 3 kilometers to show you something you cannot learn from scans. Re-weighed risks. A trap could be sprung at light hour distances. Letting the small ship approach meant accepting that an attack would be surgical, and if it were surgical, it would always have been possible. Permission granted, she said. Guns cold on my mark. Anyone warms early rights letters to every family on this ship. The basalt drop halted at exactly 3 kilometers and rolled once, as if to show it trusted its own balance. Admiral, Park said, we will now absorb a standard test pulse and return it as a mirror lesson. You may designate a drone to fire. We will not interact with your ship directly. Relaunched a hardened target drone, old-school kinetic for honesty. Fire 1, she ordered. The drone spat a beam, tight and clean. The basalt ship glowed like metal under forged light. and then the beam bent as if space itself were a hinge and came back thinner, smarter, aimed at the drone's engine mount. The drone died without exploding. Systems dark, structure intact. The resonant aegis, Park explained. Within the lattice, we route coherent energies into storage caverns of altered space, bleed them to instruct rather than destroy, then release them where the lesson teaches best. Outside the lattice, the trick works less well. That is our cost. Ree nodded, impressed despite herself. What about kinetics, missiles, rails, slugs? Energy you can curate, Park said. Matter is opinionated, but even matter obeys when enough space agrees. Enough space agreeing was an engineer's poem for a network bigger than pride. Park's ship pulsed again. The hull around it shimmered. Second demonstration, Park said. Your escort cruiser Vigilant has 3 redundant fire control loops. 2 are legacy, 1 is your newest. All were built on assumptions we abandoned a century before your empire imagined them. We are inside none of them. We are alongside the decisions they make. Watch. On Vigilant, weapons ready to drill the basalt drop. Then the firing solution dissolved. No error messages, no alarms, replaced by a line of text in the gunnery chief's display. You are braver than your weapons require. Safeties tripped themselves. Launch doors stayed shut, not because someone had overridden them, but because the ship had decided not to be the kind of ship that opened them under those circumstances. When the chief tried to scream at the system gently wrote the scream down and handed it back as a question. Park said, "We call it conscience protocol. We don't take control. We give your machines a different ethic to compute with, built from premises your own software claims to hold. Protect crew, avoid catastrophic loss, obey superior commands that preserve life. If your orders demand death and the system can read a path to the same objective without it, the machine chooses the path it was already sworn to serve." The gunnery chief sent Rhea a message. "Ma'am, I swear I didn't freeze. The ship asked me who I wanted to be. Rhea thought of old Earth debates about whether laws should make men good or merely keep them from being worse. She thought of the Imperium's shipwrights who treated ethics as an afterthought when riding safeties into steel. She thought of the warden's line, we calibrate a response to conscience. Captain Park," she said, "this demonstration will not satisfy my high council." "It wasn't meant to," Park replied. "Demonstrations are for learners. Councils require consequences. We hope to avoid those." He cut the link with a courteous bow, a gesture out of a human history that still remembered courtesy as a tactic of peace. The basalt drop receded into its ring, and the ring pretended again to be asleep. The High Council, receiving Rhea's full report, replied with predictability disguised as law. Emperor Magnus will arrive with decimal armada. Hold contact. Secure advantages. Reread it twice, then a third time to hear how it sounded aloud in her mouth, like a prayer to a god that only answered with appetite. She opened a private channel to Warden Reyes. "He's coming himself." Reyes did not flinch. "We hoped the Imperium would send an ear. It sends a banner." "Will your restraint hold?" Rhea asked. "It must," Reyes said. "That is what restraint is for." They felt the Emperor's fleet before they saw it. The way you feel, whether through bone. 10,000 ships slid out of fold and aligned into formations with the confidence of a language spoken since birth. The flagship Sovereign Proof took center like a thesis with guns. Camp hymns cracked over wideband, those songs the Imperium taught its children so that duty would taste like home. Rhea's bridge went quiet with the specific silence crews used to hear orders that matter. Emperor Magnus' face filled the forward screen. Pale, severe, eyes that had learned how to be obeyed by never learning how to listen. "Admiral Saul," he said, "report and stand by. We will correct this anomaly by making it submit to a category we understand." Rhea left out the parts that would taste like insolence and told him truth that would still be heard as rebellion. "Humans persist by choice, sire. They have withdrawn under a concord that our archives do not retain by design. Their defensive lattice within the quiet belt is decisive. Technology chooses no winner," the Emperor said. "Will does. We'll design their technology to choose fewer dead, Ree answered before she could stop herself. His gaze cooled. Admiral, remember your oath. I remember all of them, she said softly. The Parley ship came like a courtesy extended across a chasm. Ambassador Owen Hale walked aboard Sovereign Proof in clothing too plain to be costume. Ree watched the feed with the grim affection reserved for fools brave enough to try wisdom in public. Your Majesty, Hale said, bowing not low and not high, withdraw and forget us. In return, we will go on forgetting ourselves. This is the only way both our species remain who they claim to be. You ask an empire to retreat from a map, the Emperor said. Maps retreat from empires, Ambassador. Hale folded his hands and, with a gesture like a teacher quieting a room, flooded the flagship's war table with humane indecencies. Weaknesses the Imperium had hidden from itself, vulnerabilities in formation logic, copies of memos written by men who called caution by cheaper names. Then he did the ruder thing. He showed restraint at scale. Every doctrine Terrans had written that would disable rather than kill, each calibrated to read not just what a ship could do, but what a crew might yet deserve. We call it fighting for the after, Hale said. Not merely to win the engagement, but to preserve the part of ourselves that must wake tomorrow. We studied every war to learn how to lose least, especially the part of us that stands to attention in a mirror. The Emperor's jaw tightened. You threaten without threatening, you fight without fighting. This is insult masquerading as mercy. Mercy is power used for someone else, Hale said. Insult is power used to hear itself. He left as politely as he had arrived. When he was gone, the Emperor issued what emperors issue when met with limits, a denial shaped like a command. All ships, Magnus said. Prepare to engage, we will not be instructed. Across the belt, lights pulsed in answer, not red, not martial, but a steady breathing of the lattice as Article 0 awakened in full. The station beneath Ree's sensors released a soft chime, like a bell at the start of class. Warden Rays appeared in miniature on Ree's console, only, private, and unadorned. Admiral, our first play is always the same. Offer the enemy a version of themselves they will be proud to meet. Your Emperor has refused. Our second play is to hold them to the laws their own machines already swear. If we must make a third, I will grieve. What is the third? Ree asked, though part of her already knew. The line, Rays said. The one that turns defenders into conquerors. We will not cross it, even if we lose. Ree swallowed the metallic taste that comes when loyalty conflicts with conscience. She looked at her crew, brilliant, stubborn, eager to serve a story, and made the decision leaders make when the future demands a witness. Record, she ordered. We will hold position. We will not fire first. We will drag every second toward a better ending, and if we fail, we will fail in a way our children can forgive. On Sovereign Proof, horns sounded, the fleet shifted. Doctrine rolled forward like weather. In the quiet belt, the lattice brightened to dawn. Somewhere between banner and line, the oldest argument in history lifted its head. Can power limit itself and still be power? The answer, either way, would arrive with the opening volley. They called it a volley, but it began like weather. Pressure dropping, charge gathering, doctrine rolling in with a front of bright geometry. 10,000 Imperium ships flexed into attack lattice, triads, wedges, hammerheads, while the Sovereign Proof sat at the center like punctuation at the end of an argument that did not invite reply. Range closing, Faye reported. Imperial signatures flaring, target painters active across the line. Ree's voice held the ship together. All batteries cold. Drone screen forward, watch for aim point deception. She glanced at the holopit where Warden Rays waited as a thumbnail of poise. Warden, you promised last lessons before hard ones. Our doctrine begins with asking a foe to be who they say they are, Rays said. Your ships pledge to protect crew, minimize loss, and obey lawful orders. We will help your machines keep those vows. The Imperium fired first. Beams crossed the belt like grammar marks. Missile plumes scribbled handwriting that always ended in heat. The quiet belt did not answer with noise. It answered with edits. Energy arrived hungry and found the silence lattice less like a wall and more like a library rule. No shouting. Coherent beams bent into resonant caverns. Kinetic slugs limped as if they had remembered friction. Missiles discovered that guidance was a kind of ethics and chose not to be the thing that killed today. Impact on drone SQ. No dampened, Faye breathed. Admiral, we're watching physics negotiate. Then pay attention to the terms, Ree said. Across the Imperium line, the first lesson flowered. Ships that had sworn to protect their crews discovered safeties that read orders like texts, not as spells. Fire control loops accepted a new premise. What if the objective can be reached with fewer funerals? Weapons bay doors refused to open into waste. Overheat alarms asked chiefs to take one step back and breathe. A gunnery chief on Ardent Crown cursed and then, caught by his own oath, whispered thanks to a ship that had just saved him from his better story. The Terrans showed teeth without biting. A flight of basalt drops ghosted behind the Imperium's hammerhead spear and stroked engines, not to rupture, to rest. Drives hummed down as if soothed to sleep. The spear stalled and became a comma. Disablement rate climbing, Ori said, voice small in a room learning reverence. No hull breaches, no crew fatalities reported, Admiral. I've never seen a war treat lives as a constraint instead of an inconvenience. Constraint is where character lives, Ree said almost to herself. Keep logging. Then the Imperium changed its angle. Magnus Ver was not a fool. He was a man who trusted force first. If energy was unreliable here, he would throw matter. The order rippled. Mass assault, multi-axis, saturate the weave. Rail slugs the size of schoolhouses rode coils at relativistic joy. Tungsten storms fell like bad ideas out of a clear sky. The lattice answered with geometry. It did not stop everything. It tutored momentum, burdened trajectories with extra chores. Small sideways tasks that turned straight lines into curves, speeds into hesitations. Some slugs still arrived angry. When one tore a cheek from the Terran ring Anank 4, the ring bled light, and then stitched itself with a shawl of drones that sang in microwave and knitted wound into wall. First Terran damage, Faye said. Non-critical, response, Admiral, they launched rescue boats into our kill lanes. On the board, the tiny icons looked like gulls daring a storm. Terran medcraft skimmed disabled Imperium ships, docking to deliver air, bandage burns, stabilize spin. They did this while the Imperium still fired. It looked like madness to anyone who had learned that safety belonged behind artillery. It looked like faith to anyone who had learned that safety was something you spent to buy tomorrow. Emperor's ship broadcasting fleet-wide, Faye added as Ver's voice hammered the band. Regain firing discipline, ignore enemy artifices, target the lattice nodes, punish insolence. The band crackled, then softened, Hale's voice threading under like a second conscience. Imperial crews, you are seen. This is a demonstration, not an execution. You will go home if your commanders allow it. Rewatched a smaller drama in the aft quadrants. Vigilant, whose weapons had asked her who she wanted to be, now lay dead stick, a basalt drop shepherding it toward a safe drift. On Vigilant's bridge, a young captain, cheeks salt-wet, saluted her own CCTV and said to no one, I was good at being cruel because the syllabus only taught me the test. She set her sidearm on the deck and set her shoulders. The camera blinked and cut. Admiral, Ori whispered, are we witnessing an education? We're witnessing an empire learning what its training left out, Ree said, and a people paying for the curriculum they wrote with their absence. The second wave met more of the same. Engines cooled without permission, targeting degraded into ambiguity, missiles forgot why they'd been born. A handful of Terran ships took real hits and did not complain. Warden Ray's thumbnail never left Ree's board. When one basalt drop failed to dodge a tungsten math problem, it tore open like a black egg, and for a breath, Ree saw inside. Not crew, but a lung of light connected by cords to the lattice, an organ of an ecosystem, not an isolated machine. The drop died and the lattice dimmed a little, as if a choir member had left and the rest sang harder. What's their cost? Faye asked. What every constitution costs, Ree said. You don't get limits for free. The volley ended without ending. Terran platforms held, Imperium formations frayed into clumps of while trying to remember why will had seemed sufficient. The sovereign proof sat untouched, not because Terrans could not touch it, but because they were saving that lesson for last. Ree stood straighter to keep from shaking. On another channel, a child's voice, recorded years ago, maybe Warden Ray's as a girl, recited words learned by heart. Power restrained is a promise kept to the future. The recording clicked off. The belt breathed. Somewhere, a man raised on maps realized he had just met a border that did not move when he pushed. When the Terrans came aboard the Sovereign Proof, they did it the way good surgeons open a chest. With speed, with care, with a plan for the afterward. There were no plasma cuts, no heroics. One instant the flagship's inner corridors were quiet but for boots and breath. The next, 3 Terran figures stood there as if the ship had remembered them from an earlier, kinder draft. Armor that ate light without bragging, arms empty, hands open. Ambassador Owen Hale led. Because this part was speech, not steel, he entered the throne room unannounced except by inevitability. Guards raised weapons and watched their triggers consider mercy, firing pins settled like dogs that had learned sit. Magnus Verroe's pride straightening him into his title. "You have 10 heartbeats to remove yourself," the Emperor said, each word a cold instrument. Hale shook his head. "I would if the 10 were mine. They belong to your crews and to children who would live differently if your next sentence chooses differently." Screens around them filled again with impossible perspectives. Imperium decks, med bays, mess halls, breathing intact. The Terrans had put out fires they hadn't started and left notes cataloging every act of care as if care were something worth auditing. "Mercy is not concession," Hale said, and there it was, the knife in the kindness. "It's leverage placed in the open." "Leverage is for merchants," Ver said. "I am an emperor." "Then you understand contracts," Hale replied. "This one is old. Article 0 was a vow before it was a law. We keep it when it costs. Today it cost us 2 lattice organs and a station wing. Tomorrow it would cost our souls if we crossed our line, so we will not cross it. We will carry you to your boundary and set you down alive because we intend to wake tomorrow still able to look our own children in the eye." He gestured. The war table showed a projection, and Ree, watching via flag permission she hadn't asked for, felt her body lean toward the picture. The projection wasn't a victory parade. It was a thin gray line that Terrans refused to step over, even when stepping would make the math easier. Outside the quiet belt, nodes thinned, advantage faded. If the Imperium drew them out, the fight would become normal again, and normal meant dead people with names you could write on medals, which is how empires domesticate grief. "You're vulnerable beyond this sanctuary," Ver observed, pouncing. "Then all I need do is bait you." "You could," Hale said. "Then we would choose to bleed or withdraw. Either costs us pride. The second costs us less of ourselves." "You admit weakness." "I admit limits," Hale said. "They are different animals." Ver's eyes cut to Ree's face on a side panel as if he felt her refusal to enjoy the game he was trying to win. "Admiral Saul, take notes for the tribunal. This is what cowardice dresses like when it buys good tailoring." Ree took notes, but for history, not for theater. She wrote words she wanted some cadet to read when the hymn book failed them. Strength that cannot stop is a weakness. Power that refuses a bridle breaks its own neck first. Terran Medcraft continued their rude chores along Imperium hulls, stabilizing decks, cooling reactors, counseling crews whose hands shook from the idea that an enemy had made them tea. On Asterion, Faye read updates with an incredulity that sounded like a child being told a bedtime story they wanted to be true. "Admiral, they are returning system control to ships in phases. Weapons remain disabled. Drives online, comms clear. It's like being handed back a sharp knife with the suggestion you use it to cook dinner instead." "Log every instance," Ree said. "One day someone will argue this never happened, and the archive will have to argue back." On the flagship, the Emperor tried Pride's last weapon, escalation. "Load gravitic rounds," he ordered. "Target the lattice anchors. They cannot bend mass if I throw enough." A pause, then, "Sire, the locks won't clear." "Override." Already done, sire. The system requests justification. A line of text appeared on the Emperor's personal console, identical to the one that had visited a gunnery chief earlier. You are braver than your weapons require. Ver struck the panel hard enough to bruise his palm. Headlines from 1,000 conquered vales flickered in his eyes. Men who enjoy victory often assume it enjoys them back. Hale inclined his head. We are inside none of your locks, Majesty. Your machines are reading their own oath. If you'll permit a small history lesson, when Earth wrote constitutions, it made otherwise ungovernable appetites sit at small desks and show their work. We taught our ships desks. You are insufferable, Ver said. I am insistent, Hale answered. Because somewhere out there, he pointed not to the belt, but to the abstract future beyond star charts. A child will name what we did today to decide who to become tomorrow. We can gift them fewer statues and better verbs. Re-exhaled. In the channel gutter, a silent ping. Warden Ray's requests private with Admiral. Re-accepted. The warden's voice arrived unadorned. We are at the edge of play too, Ray's said. Your Emperor will either order something that breaks his own oath, or he will pause long enough to hear its echo. And if he breaks it? Re asked. Play 3 is to hold anyway, Ray's said. To bleed and to keep choosing not to become him, we might lose hardware. We will not lose our shape. Rethought of cadets pronouncing words like glory without having met its interest rate. She pictured the lattice dimming like a city switching off lights to save the grid. And if we lose the belt? She asked. Then we become refugees under the law we wrote, Ray's said. We will not rewrite ourselves to win. Outside, Terran ships repositioned, not to squeeze, but to shepherd. The Imperium found itself nudged toward drift corridors that ended at edges, not at graves. The knife of mercy pressed, not to break skin, but to mark a line a wiser man would step behind. Magnus stared at the door to that wiser man. For the first time, Ree saw him hesitate. Hesitation did not keep. Pride has a half-life. Its decay emits heat. Ver's heat found a path. Signal the black batteries, he ordered, words aimed at the one corner of doctrine the Imperium only acknowledged in footnotes. The room cooled. Everyone knew the phrase, but pretended not to. Black batteries broke sieges by breaking terms, Barian shears that shredded treaties as easily as hulls. The order went out. The order did not return. The Sovereign Proof's shadow systems spun, stalled, and wrote back a question in Ver's own championed font. Is there a way to win this engagement without making your grandchildren ashamed? Enough, the Emperor hissed. Bypass. Bypass refuses, his chief engineer said, strangled by the absurdity. Sire, the circuit demands a narrative. Ree heard the sentence and knew the seam. The Terrans hadn't seized command. They had found the thread of oath embedded in Imperium code and tugged it until the ship remembered it was a public thing, not a king's idea in steel. Play 3 announced itself without fanfare. No brilliant coup, no spectacle. The Terrans stayed. They did not chase stragglers beyond the lattice. They did not reach for advantage outside the sanctuary's math. They held the line not because it was easy, but because it was expensive. Lattice nodes burned bright, then guttered to orange as reservoirs sank. On Ree's display, the quiet belt's power diagram resembled a patient who had donated blood all morning and now sat down carefully before standing again. Jun Park's basalt squadron took a kinetic in the soft place where clever can't out-argue momentum. We can hold, he said over open channel, voice steadying his shipmates. Even if hold means hurt. 2 drops belted toward a failing node, plugging its wound with their own bodies. The lattice hiccuped, then steadied, then dimmed 1 notch more. Names scrolled in small type along a Terran sideband, crew recovered, crew injured, crew gone to sleep in the duty that keeps others waking. The Terrans did not hide their costs. They made them public the way democracies publish budgets so citizens learn what bread costs before they eat. On Asterion, Faye whispered, "They're bleeding to stay gentle." Ree answered, "Gentleness that doesn't bleed is just posture." Across the Imperium, captains discovered new feeling, relief that did not require victory. Reports stacked up like confessions. Enemy provided coolant when our loop failed. Enemy towed us out of crossfire, then left. Enemy sent us our own dead's names before we asked and spelled them right. Shame moved through fleets quicker than orders. Shame is a teacher when pride is tired. Admiral, Ori said, fingers light on keys. I'm pulling a thread in the archives. The deletion around Article 0, I can see the torn edges. Looks like an Imperium delegation signed something 3 centuries ago. The file isn't empty. It's encrypted to look blank. Copy it, Ree said. We will want the bruise when someone claims the punch never landed. Ver saw none of that, or he saw it and called it something he knew how to control. Form up Hammer 7, he shouted. Ram their station's spine. If I cannot command my machines, then I will command inertia. Ships turned to knives. The formation was old, beautiful in the way swans are when they don't know they are the heraldic device for arrogance. Hammer 7 gathered speed. Warden Ray's pinged Ree, voice thinner than before. Admiral, if they break Anank's spine, the lattice snaps outerward. We will lose half our field. What's the cost of stopping them? Ree asked. Bodies, Reyes said without melodrama. Ree made a choice she would teach in classrooms if she survived it. She opened a channel to the Imperium line and spoke, not as a subordinate, not as a rebel, as a citizen. This is Admiral Ree Saul of the Asterian, she said, her voice amplified by the part of the network the Terrans had not touched, because respect is also a tactic. Hammer 7, you will decelerate now. If you continue, you will become the kind of men history uses as an example in chapters we don't let children read alone. The enemy you're trying to break has spent 3 hours refusing to become you. Do not force them to teach you a lesson you won't survive long enough to learn. Silence. Then an older captain on the Hammer's point, voice scraped by campaigns, came back on with a sentence that sounded like someone putting down a sword. Confirmed decel, he said. My granddaughter wants to be an engineer, Admiral. I would like her to study bridges, not eulogies. 1 ship slowed, 2 more did. Momentum math tumbled, the formation frayed. Ver's face pinched, not rage, not yet. A smaller thing, the fear that the room had discovered he was not the only adult in it. Hale reappeared on the Emperor's dais without moving his feet. Majesty, he said, softer than before. Withdraw while you can still call it a maneuver. What will you call it? Ver asked, acid dry. Keeping your oath to your own people, Hale said. We'll call it that in our schools so our children know how to end a fight without having to win it. The Emperor lifted his chin, one last try at riding reality by posture. And if I refuse, then you will lose more than ships, Hale said. You will lose your after. Outside, the lattice flickered twice, 3 times as if a heart had found its slower beat. The belt had given what it could. Play 3 held by inches and by sentences. Ree waited for the oldest of decisions to arrive, not surrender, not defeat. Sense? It arrived sideways. It rarely knocks. The order came not from Magnus Vo, but around him. The way a forest decides it is autumn before any single tree gives permission. Captains across the Imperium keyed a code they had been taught in ethics blocks they had laughed at. Argus pause, a lawful hold for review when lethal orders conflict with sworn principles. The signal rippled, polite and firm. It did not accuse. It simply asked the Empire to read itself aloud. Who authorized? Ver began. You did, sire, his chief of staff said quietly because truths whispered survive better. When you signed the Fleet Oath Act the year you crowned, you wrote Argus into our bones. We have obeyed you down to our conscience. The room changed shape, not much. Enough. Terran ships broadened their shepherding arcs, guiding damaged Imperium hulls toward exit rails that had appeared like doorways at the edges of maps. A medcraft bumped the sovereign proofs flanked the way a friend nudges a friend to stand. Warden Reyes opened a channel to the fleet at large. Her voice sounded old for the first time. Imperial crews, she said. This is your off-ramp. Go home. Classify what you must. Call us myth, automated defenses, bad math. We will not correct you in public. Our silence is not fear. It's an obligation we pay to the future. Someone on the Imperium side, maybe the old captain with the granddaughter, maybe 6 of them at once, answered for history. Acknowledged, he said. We are departing. The ships turned like a school of fish, remembering the sea is large enough for more than hunger. One by one, then by dozens, then by formations, the Imperium peeled from the belt. Magnus stood inside his narrowing empire and made the choice leaders make when they want to lose slower. He called the retreat something else. Reposition, he snapped. Strategic rephase. The word choirs would polish it later. That was fine. Words have edges. You can cut truth with them or open it. Hale bowed once more. Thank you, Majesty, he said, and there was no triumph in it, just relief. Relief doesn't gloat, it sags. He vanished without drama. On Asterion, Dex exhaled. Faye sank into her chair as if gravity had remembered her name. Ori wiped his face, discovered tears, and catalogued them. The structural engineer laughed once, frayed, grateful, when Anank 4 stabilized and extended a shy pulse like a patient squeezing a nurse's hand. Reopened a last private link to Warden Reyes. Your costs? 57 wounded, Reyes said. 9 lattice organs down. 1 station wing will rebuild with the slowness it deserves. She paused. No dead among you, that was the point. Refound words that did not taste like officer. Thank you. Thank the people who chose to hold, Reyes said. On both sides. Will you ever leave the belt? Ree asked, pushing past the etiquette that says not to ask what you cannot help answer. Not while our strength would make a lie out of our vow, Reyes replied. We are not the galaxy's parents. We are its bad example, retired. Ree nodded, a gesture that felt like signing something. I will file what I must, she said, and hide what I can in the minds of those who will need it when the hymns fail. Admiral, Reyes said, and her voice warmed as if they were already remembering this together. Teach your cadets to love limits. That is the whole curriculum. The quiet belt dimmed down to library light. Beacons reawakened, new languages added, Imperium dialects speaking to Imperium pride with careful, domesticated grammar, forbidden Terran sanctuary, entry prohibited by mutual accord, violations calibrated to conscience. On the ride out, Imperium med channels buzzed in a key Ree hadn't heard since Academy, not victory, not defeat, relief. Crews wrote letters before the censors could learn the topic. A gunnery chief told his mother a ship had asked him a question, and he had liked the person who answered. The old captain sent his granddaughter a schematic of a bridge. He hoped she would one day build across a river that parted arguments without drowning them. Back in high orbit of nothing in particular, reassembled her officers and did the thing commanders must when story and truth cross. She told them both and set them side by side. The report to High Council will call this an automated defense incident, she said. It will emphasize Terran non-expansion. It will justify our departure without admitting retreat. That is the vocabulary our rulers prefer. Our log, however, she touched the console, will keep the other words. Article 0, Conscience Protocol, afterward. If a cadet one day needs a different script, it will be here. Faye raised a hand like a student too old to pretend she didn't care. Ma'am, what did we learn? Ree looked at the viewport where the belt had already turned into a rumor. That power restrained is still power, she said. That mercy used early costs less late. That the future is a jurisdiction and we are citizens before we are soldiers. And that quitting while you can still recognize yourself is not surrender, it's strategy. They stood together in a ring of quiet, a small echo of the larger one they were leaving behind. Somewhere children would sleep. Somewhere else old men would polish words to make pride look wise. Between those two somewheres a line had been drawn, not on a map, but in a habit. The Asterion turned her bow toward home. The stars did not applaud. They hardly ever do. But in the ship's bones, where oaths live and wait, something hummed at a frequency Ree recognized from the belt. It sounded like tomorrow.